Story 1. Many moons ago, I was part of a malicious compliance situation. Here's how it unfolded. Background. The summer before I entered high school, the Ministry of Education decided to change the standardized testing used for university entry. This had happened in the past, and usually, it took a year to implement changes. However, this plan was really complicated and needed 2 years to implement. It's called throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Guess which class got to be the lab rats? That's right, mine. We started school with only a vague idea of what the changes would be until mid-October. Then we learned that the first changes would be implemented on the midterms. The midterms used to be 2 weeks long and provided 40% of the final grade. But the new plan was for a full month of testing that counted for only 20% towards the final grade. A major player in the malicious compliance was our literature teacher. Let's call her Karen. Now, I have to admit, she was good at her subject. The problems in her teaching came from prejudice and preconceptions. In a 25-person class, she used to work with 4 or 5 students, specifically kids from upper-class families or the best part of town. The rest of us were just background for her. A few parents had complained, but due to reasons we learned later, she was always engaging during inspections and kept her job. The malicious compliance. It was midterms time, and one of the new tests was creative writing. As I mentioned, this was one of the new tests. The ministry had provided general instructions for the tests, but left the specifics to each school. For this one, Karen set the specifics. The general instructions asked the teacher to pick a book from the syllabus, and the pupil had to write at least 800 words from the point of view of one of the characters. Karen had a strong preference for epics, so she chose the Iliad, expecting everyone to pick a hero. Everybody did, except for 3 of us, Jane, Indiana, and myself. I don't know if we wanted to rebel against the system or against Karen, but the 3 of us didn't follow the norm. Jane was a really good student, but had the usual trouble in Karen's class. She chose Andromache, the wife of Hector. She described the last day of Hector from Andromache's point of view. My friend Indiana is a mythology enthusiast. He became an archaeologist, which is why we call him Indiana, and absolutely disliked Karen's teachings of the material. He picked Zeus. He basically wrote Zeus's point of view, noticing every female named in the Iliad and his attraction to them. I chose Cassandra. She had the gift of prophecy, but the curse of never being believed. I wrote the whole point of view as we're all doomed and never believed. The results came out, and we were the only ones who failed 8.7 and 7 out of 20, because we, according to Karen, completely missed the point of the test. But the aftermath. Unknown to everybody, except the principal, the ministry had sent instructors to grade the tests independently of the teachers. They published their grades, and 3 particular tests had huge grade discrepancies. So, one misty morning, the 3 of us were called to the meeting room. Inside was our principal, a clearly fuming Karen, and 3 people we didn't know. They introduced themselves as part of the Ministry of Education. They wanted us to explain why we chose those characters. We all said, it said any character, so we chose one we liked. Every time we said that, they glanced at Karen. They thanked us and told us that their grade would go towards our final grade. Karen had inspectors dropping in on her unexpectedly. As I said in the beginning, she had passed the local inspections because of something she did. She was having an affair with the assistant director of the local education department, and he always notified her before the inspection. Now they came directly from the ministry, and she was always unprepared. She was allowed to finish the year and then was dismissed. The ministry took a year and a half to figure out the system. We were the first class to officially take the new standardized test. Creative writing was part of the literature exam. Jane became a journalist and a writer. Indiana became an archaeologist. As for me, I'm in here. Story 2. A few years ago, I was at a pet shop picking out some toys for my cat, and the total ended up being around $40. I paid with my card because I don't carry cash on me, which was fine until I had another browse of the store and decided I wanted to get some treats for my cat as well. I think they were around $5. I went to pay for them at the counter with my card, and the owner cashier refused to put my purchase through unless it was over $20. She said they get charged a transaction fee for card purchases, so they only allow card purchases for amounts over $20. I asked if they could just add the surcharge on top of the amount, but she refused. I had to spend over $20 to use my card. I was pretty annoyed considering I had just bought a whole heap of stuff, so I asked if she got charged a transaction fee if I got a refund. It turns out they do. So I asked to return the other stuff that I bought, got my money back, and I guess they got charged the transaction fee twice anyway. Edit. I just want to say, don't feel bad about the store. They treated their animals really horribly. You can search online and see the number of petitions people created to shut the store down. Story 3. This one is short, and the comments on another post here reminded me of it. The city I live in provides you with one recycling bin for free. If you want an extra one, it's $10. If it breaks for any reason, they replace it for free. When I moved into my house, the old owners left the recycling bin. Both handles were broken, which made it nearly impossible to carry, so I took it to the dump to exchange it. When I got there, I was told it was still usable, so they wouldn't replace it, but I could buy a new one for $10. After a bit of polite arguing, I asked if there were any restrictions on how the bin breaks to have it replaced. They said no. If it breaks for any reason at all and is unusable, they would replace it. So I placed it on the floor and stomped on it a few times until it was in pieces. I then picked them up, put them on the counter, and said, "Excuse me, my recycling bin broke, and I'd like a replacement, please." They had no issues giving me a replacement. Story 4. I have an app for the city parking where I live. I loaded it with money so I don't have to go to the machines and use my credit card or coins to pay. It makes life easy and lets you know how much time is left. Life is good. Well, after not working for quite some time, I took a job across the country 3,500 kilometers away. Yes, we have a big country. I got all my affairs in order, got to my new city, changed over all the IDs, all my forms, etc. I moved on with my life. Some time passed, and I got an email from the old city parking app about updating something. I loaded up my account as I should delete it, but it showed I still had a balance left, just under $5. I had completely forgotten about it. It felt like the times you put on a coat and find some money in the pocket. Score. I sent off an email to the city email for the app requesting a refund as I would not be using the account again. A worker called me a day or two later and was very apologetic. She had processed it and sent it for refund, but city policy won't issue refunds for under $5. She was very friendly and kind, and you could tell she felt bad having to tell me this. Being me and loving this subreddit, I asked the question, if I put more money onto my account, would you then be able to refund the money? She laughed and said that was ingenious. It would create double the work for them, but yes, I could do that. So I have now put more money onto my account and sent an email for a new refund. I will enjoy my coffee tomorrow with that extra couple of dollars I will get back. Story 5. I'm reminiscing because my grandpa, 89 years old, recently had a stroke. A few years back in the fall, when he was in better health, we would rake up all the leaves in his large yard. However, the township said we couldn't burn them like we usually do, a new law or something on the books. Now, being that we live in a very rural area, my grandpa didn't like this. He was in his 70s at this point, and I think I was barely a teenager, but he was also a lawyer for years before he retired, so the law must be followed. Anyway, we didn't feel like taking load after load of leaves to the dump, but we couldn't burn them. So we loaded them high into the back of Grandpa's pickup, and not wanting to go to the dump, I said, "Grandpa, let's just drive until they all blow away." And so we did. It was glorious, me riding shotgun and my 70-year-old grandpa, he was probably closer to 80 at the time, to be honest, driving down the country road with the tailgate down, watching all the leaves blow out into the fields behind us. We had great fun doing it and still talk about it to this day. Can't burn the leaves, you say? Alright, then we'll redistribute them. Update. I didn't expect this to get so much attention. Grandpa is home from the hospital but weak, with a lot of rehab and recovery ahead. I will be telling him he is internet famous for the time we redistributed the leaves. I hope it cheers his spirit a little. Story 6. Back in August, my wife and I decided we wanted to put up a sign to promote our preferred candidate for the upcoming presidential election here in Texas. I wanted to see what my town's ordinances said about what and where we could put the sign up, as we were planning to put a banner on our fence that is very prominent facing traffic that goes along the side of our house, but that is at the edge of our property. The ordinances had a few rules about where the sign could and couldn't be. For example, don't put them on a utility pole, the maximum size of the sign 36 square feet, how high off the ground, etc. It also said that political signs would be allowed 30 days prior to any election. Note here it didn't say the election, which would have implied that the election had to be related to the sign. As far as I was concerned, it could be, as the ordinance said in plain English, any election. So we ordered a 36 square foot banner off of an online marketplace, nailed and tied it to the fence on a Saturday in August. The next Monday, code enforcement dropped by and said something along the lines of, "We had an inquiry about your sign. It isn't in compliance with ordinance," and asked us to take it down. I wasn't home at the time. My wife told him that I wasn't home, but that I had read the ordinance and it said any election, and that we were in compliance. There was some back and forth. They settled on if you request a sign permit that would give us a month with the sign up. Then we would be within 30 days of early voting in Texas, which is how the town has traditionally interpreted the meaning of 30 days prior to any election. So I get home from running the errand I was on, and my wife tells me what has transpired. I still thought the sign was legal under the ordinance, but to make my wife happy, I applied for and was granted the permit. 2 days later, the same code enforcement officer came to our house and said that the town manager had overruled his issuing of the permit, and that the sign needed to come down. I told him that I only applied for the permit to make my wife happy, and that the sign has always been legal under the ordinance, and that the town was not without choices as it could clean up the language in the ordinance. More back and forth. I asked him what the next steps were. Do you remove the sign would have made great footage from my security camera? Do you cite me? Etc. He said he would talk to the town manager. I said that I would be happy to discuss it with the town manager. So the town manager calls me later that day. He says things like, "Most people don't put 36 square foot signs on residential property." I told him that I wasn't most people. I believed that I was following the letter of the ordinance and that the sign was up in accordance with any election, including the fact that several of the 54 primaries are currently happening 50 states plus territories plus voters overseas, and that those are all elections for the purposes of the ordinance. He says that he would contact the town's lawyer. Hours later, he calls back. I guess the town's lawyer was not busy that day and was able to opine instantly on the matter. He says the town's lawyer thinks the ordinance is enforceable, but that they have decided not to take an enforcement action. I told him I still believed I was in compliance because I was following the any election provision, but that he was making the right choice, as there was a pandemic going on. But I had also been doing some research. Many people think of Texas as very similar to the rest of the South, where local government is best. But my understanding of how things work in Texas is that cities and towns cannot do things that the state doesn't allow them to do. So things are often enumerated or restricted at the state level. And it just so happens that Texas has a chapter on political signs. Title 15 is Regulating Political Funds and Campaigns, and Chapter 259 is Political Signs. Section 259.03 is titled Regulation of Political Signs by Municipality and says in part, a municipal charter provision or ordinance that regulates signs may not. For a sign that contains primarily a political message and that is located on private real property with the consent of the property owner, prohibit the sign from being placed. It looks like there are some caveats elsewhere in the chapter, such as it applies to signs 36 square feet and smaller, etc. But it definitely applies to my circumstances. So the town's ordinance restricts someone from placing a political sign 30 days before any election. It sure seems like that violates this section of Texas law. Now armed with some information, I went to town council and spoke at one of the open forums, where residents can address the council on any topic. My town is pretty small, full of people who don't share my political views, and the council reflects that pretty well. But I told them about how the ordinance appeared to violate Texas law. I also told them about a recent Supreme Court ruling from 2015 Reed v. Town of Gilbert that set a bit of a surprising precedent. Basically, under certain conditions, the town might have to survive strict scrutiny when taking enforcement actions on signs and demonstrate a narrowly tailored, compelling government interest for why certain signs could only be up for short times versus other signs being up for longer times. Anyway, the town has worked with me on this issue. And the town manager is a busy person. But he did say that the town's lawyer and he would circle up and propose changes to the council in the coming months. I hope this post inspires you to get out there and vote and also engage with your government at the local, state, and national levels.